Opening the central diagonal immediately stakes a claim for space. Developing the knight to its natural outpost immediately contests central space and prepares for further development. Seizing central space, white instantly challenges black's knight, preparing to expand operations on the queenside and create potential pawn breakthroughs. Shielding the king's diagonal is a prudent response, preparing to develop pieces harmoniously. Developing a knight here prepares for kingside castling and supports a central pawn push, aiming for dynamic play. Developing the knight to d7 supports the c5 advance and keeps central pawn options open. Opening the center decisively, this thrust aims to activate pieces and seize central space, potentially leading to dynamic play. Challenging the center, black immediately injects sharp dynamism and opens lines for the bishop. Developing the knight to a less active square might allow black to seize central space, a curious decision. Shedding the central pawn clears the d-file for potential piece activation and signals a willingness to enter more open positions. Reclaiming the center, white establishes a pawn duo, aiming to leverage central space advantage for future queenside expansion. Launching a fianchetto here, black seeks to anchor a bishop on the long diagonal, aiming to counter white's central pawn mass. Solidifying the center's grip, this bishop prepares for a robust kingside development, aiming for harmonious piece activity. Developing the bishop to this diagonal opens up clear lines for its influence, aiming to pressure white's center. Fortifying the center, white prepares for a kingside assault while solidifying piece harmony. Securing the king's safety is paramount, especially with the center poised for dynamic exchanges. This maneuver sets up a robust defensive structure. Initiating queenside expansion and preparing to castle kingside rapidly. Bringing the rook to the central file aims to unblock the bishop and potentially challenge white's queenside pawn structure. Solidifying the center and preparing for a kingside pawn storm, though it does block the bishop's diagonal for now. A subtle repositioning, the knight aims to bolster the kingside defense or perhaps join an attack through f8. Castling secures the king, preparing for central pawn pushes and aligning pieces for action. Developing the bishop to d7 connects the rooks and prepares for future pawn breaks, aiming to undermine white's central control. Asserting central presence on the semi-open file, white prepares for an eventual kingside assault by bolstering their piece coordination and restricting black's development. Nodding to a knight's role in the king's Indian setup, this redeployment acknowledges the central pawn chain and prepares for eventual kingside action. The knight's journey to c2 seeks to reinforce the d4 pawn and prepare a potential queenside advance, subtly altering the positional balance. Asserting pressure on the d4 pawn, this bishop simultaneously eyes potential sacrifices on c3. Disrupting black's piece placement, this knight eyes the weakened c6 square and pressures the bishop, aiming to exploit potential weaknesses in the pawn structure. Opening that queenside to challenge white's centralized knight and gain counterplay. Unleashing a knight to d5 creates immediate pressure on the c7 pawn and forces black to address the centralized threat. A thoughtful repositioning, aiming to support the central presence and potentially unburden the queenside from immediate pressure. Reinforcing the e4-d5 diagonal offers control and potential for initiative. Challenging the knight's outpost, this maneuver aims to disrupt white's central control and potentially activate the queenside. Recentralizing the bishop aims to challenge black's fianchetto and reclaim space on the kingside, though it momentarily relinquishes control of the b5 outpost. Reclaiming central space, the knight repositions to challenge white's knights and facilitate piece circulation. Solidifying the queenside pawn structure, white prepares to expand their space on the flank. The knight, finally finding an active square, begins a potential assault on white's weakened queenside pawn structure. Shifting the queen to c2 aims to prepare for kingside pressure and potentially clear the d-file for rook activity. Liberating the bishop from its passive guard post on c6, this maneuver aims to activate the piece and contest the d4 square, subtly shifting the battleground. Unleashing kingside initiative by challenging black's pawn chain. This aggressively opens lines. This pawn advances to contest the central pawn structure, subtly opening a diagonal for the queen and aiming to dislodge white's advanced knight. Unleashing the kingside pawn storm. This gambit aims to shatter black's pawn shield and expose the monarch to relentless assault, sacrificing material for initiative. A bold pawn thrust, opening the file but weakening the pawn structure, inviting tactical skirmishes. Sacrificing the knight opens a dangerous path for your rook, demanding black's full attention. Embracing the open f-file with this pawn recapture fortifies your central presence and prepares for aggressive kingside counterplay. Opening the e-file with this capture immediately creates dynamic imbalances and tactical opportunities. Black recaptures the pawn, opening the e-file and creating a dynamic central pawn structure that requires careful maneuvering. Liberating the knight opens a critical central diagonal, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure and exploit potential weaknesses. Liberating the bishop from its passive post, this move initiates a daring counterplay aimed at exploiting white's exposed kingside. Repositioning the queen to c1 aims to avoid the immediate pin, and potentially eye the kingside pawn structure for future pressure. Initiating a crucial fight for central squares, this maneuver seeks to disrupt white's consolidated pawn structure and create dynamic counterplay. Threatening the pinned knight, white seeks to unravel the kingside pawn structure. Initiating a pawn storm on the kingside opens up attacking possibilities, but beware of creating weaknesses. Consolidating the knight's outpost solidifies white's central grip, forcing a re-evaluation of black's attacking potential. Unleashing the queen to a surprisingly active outpost, threatening white's pawn structure and creating immediate tactical possibilities. Trading queens simplifies the position, aiming to exploit black's slightly exposed king. Re-establishing central control after the exchange, black aims to regroup their pieces and improve the bishop's scope. Simplifying the position with this bishop exchange, white aims to neutralize black's active pieces and gain a slight endgame advantage through pawn structure control. King safety is paramount. This capture, while regaining material, exposes your monarch to incoming threats. Opening the g-file, white hopes to exploit the weakened king position for an attack. Recapturing the pawn solidifies the central pawn structure, although it leaves your monarch exposed. Unleashing the knight to the 7th rank, creating a potent outpost and threatening to disrupt black's pawn structure.